Hello, YouTubers. Hello, world. As I promised you in previous videos, I've decided to do, well, it's a contextual video because the trolls, bless them, another IQ point, they'd be lampposts. They're pointing the finger and they're saying, you're racist, you're sexist, you're a misogynist. I mean, I don't know even where they got that from. Homophobic, sexist and racist. So I've asked for the source. And I figure I know what the source is. So I'm going to tell you about the Guardian article. I mean, I'm not a Guardian reader. I wouldn't wipe my backside with a Guardian if it was the last bit of paper on earth. I'd wipe it on the grass. So I'm going to give you a context of who I am. Because there's a lot of people coming to my videos and coming to the channel who have no idea of my background, of what I've done over the last 30 odd years, 40 years. And they all believe that I'm copying the convicted stalker. So as you will learn, the convicted stalker copied me. So who am I? My name is Adrian Allen, that's my real name. What is my background? Well, I've spent since 1979, so what'd that make it, 43 years? I'm only 44, you're wrong. Last 43 years I've been doing radio in all of its guises. Radio is my passion, and I still do it to this day for free in the northeast of England on a radio station called Zetland FM. Once a week, Saturday night, 5 o'clock. It's how I started my radio career at Radio Tees, as it was then, a commercial radio station in the northeast. I was a nightclub DJ and started doing some work for Radio Tees, and I did a soul and dance and funk show once a week. And that's what I do. If you want to go and listen to it, www.zetlandfm, all one word, .co.uk, Adrian Allen's Land of the Good Groove, 5 through 8 on a Saturday evening. So radio is my passion. I would do it for being paid, and I would do it for nothing. I'll give you some examples of my work. But what we're going to do on the channel is I'm trying to find a video editing suite that I can put audio into, put pictures on, so that you can hear my work. So that you can hear that some of the stuff that I've done 20 years ago is being copied by various others, including the convicted stalker. Doing late night phone-ins was literally the best fun you could have without taking your clothes off. In fact, it was the best fun you could have without getting arrested. There are giants of that space. People like, well, I'll tell you how I got to know him and then why I got into doing phone-ins, whether they be lunchtime or late night. I was a music guy, a music presenter for Radio Tees and then TFM in the northeast. Still a young guy, still doing some nightclub work, but I was getting to do regular Monday to Friday early breakfast show. And this guy joined the radio station, who I'd never heard of before, but it was like a bolt of lightning had hit the radio station. He was just amazing. Literally, I could sit at his feet and he could tell me these stories. Scrunch my bunties, Adrian. James Stanage, the Don, the King, the man, from Manchester. Last time I saw him, we were both a bit buckled. Just the odd snifter. James, if you're watching this, I hope you're doing well, my friend. It's been a long time. But James Stanage came to TFM and he was the guy that just filled me full of awe and wonder. And I used to listen to the late night phone and thinking, how did he do that? And I'd been a listener of James Whale at Metro Radio up the road. And James is an amazing practitioner. But for me, the king was always Stanage. And then, the flashing blade. Alan Robson took over. He's the king of the northeast. He's done it since God was a boy. And an amazing talent and practitioner. And a man with such insight and wisdom. These men are kings. These men know human beings. They know how to entertain an audience, a mass audience of millions. These men are the best, bar none. There are people like Clive Bull, who I consider similarly, Alan Beswick, Mike the Mouth Elliott, who's sadly no longer around with us, but what a consummate entertainer. Wonderful to listen to. There's Scotty McClue, Colin Lamont, as I've said before, amazing talent, and James Whale, as I've previously mentioned. These men, without Pete Price in Liverpool, there are other late night phoning presenters that have been amazing in their time. But what was the job of a late night phone-in guy or woman? Because there have been some. There is one that used to pluck a bikini line while she was doing the phone-in. Fact. So the job of the presenter was to get complaints, because the managing director, although it was a pain in the backside, they knew that if your presenter was getting complaints, then the audience was there. It wasn't ignoring them. So more complaints increased the audience. And I've been in commercial radio for 40 years. And the job of the phone-in is, there are two ways that the audience is measured. It is the amount of people listening, and then the amount of time that they're listening. It's called the average hours. So advertisers would come to the commercial radio station and say, I want to advertise with your radio station. And the radio station would say, we've got 100,000 people listening at 10 o'clock at night, and they're listening for 3 hours. So the longer they listen for, the better impact for the advertisers. It was that simple. Commercial radio just sold airtime to make money to pay us all. And the job of the late night phone-in guy was to create and increase the average hours of the radio station. So if you've got a guy doing 4 or 5 phone-ins a week, and that people are listening for 3 or 4 hours each day, that's a huge amount of average hours. So phone-ins were very much a tool to create an audience. Create the audience, get the complaints, deal with the complaints, increase the audience, and then, back in the day, you could shock the audience. And it was this moral indignation. It wasn't really shocking in a bad way. It was just winding people up. We were all agents provocateurs. We just wound people up. Some of my rants, blimey, I'll get them on here. You'll soon see. Nobody did rants like me. Nobody. Not even the convicted stalker. He tried, but he didn't know how to. He would nick my lines and nick my on-air persona, but he didn't know how to, because it wasn't part of him. It's part of me. I'm going to get them on this channel. So let me give you some background as to this, the reason why I asked for it. And I'm going to read this out. As well as reading it out, I'm going to post it in this video. If I can learn how to do it in 24 hours, I'm going to post it in this video so you can see it. This is from 20 years ago. And The Guardian, you know my feelings about The Guardian. Now, in my teens, I was a card-carrying member of the Labour Party. As it turned out, I've been a card-carrying member of all the political parties just to wind everybody up. But the lefty, woke, snowflake, Scum Sucking Pondlife. So, this article is subject to a judge's order. A judge told them to take it offline. And for it to be online 20 years later means The Guardian has gubbed up somewhere. And that's why I was asking for the source, because it's subject to a judge's order. It's a hatchet piece. It's a hatchet piece to discredit me. And why? Because I cost The Guardian millions. How did I do that? The European Working Time Directive states, I'm sure it's still statute law, states that anyone with a freelance contract should be given the same permissions as somebody who's hired full time. That means they get 20 days paid holiday per year. So anybody that worked for the Guardian Media Group for the last 20 years, or the Guardian, your 20 days paid holiday on a freelance contract is all down to me. You can thank me. You can buy me beers. I'm happy with that. But if it hadn't been for me taking the Guardian to court under the ruling of the European Working Time Directive, you wouldn't be getting your 20 days paid holiday, because they wouldn't have paid. But they do, because they have to, because of the same judge's ruling that told them to take this article offline. So, John Myers, to his grave, was apoplectic at me, because John's favourite phrase, bullshit baffles brains. And the trust that owns The Guardian, well, I'm not going to betray any trusts, but bullshit baffled their brains. And then when he had to go and stand in a court of law in this country and say, oh, yeah, we'll pay them. And then go back to the board and go, we've got to pay everybody 20 days paid holiday a year on a freelance contract. Oh, he hated that. Hated it. So, there's a bit of context and background. So that will give you some insight into what I had to do, what my job was, and how I did it before this article. And I'm going to give you a test in law. The test in law, if there's a number of allegations being made, and there are in this article, in absence of any evidence, because evidence is absent in this article, if you can disprove categorically with evidence that at least one of these allegations, you can say by inference, that all the allegations are false. If one allegation is false, all the allegations are false. In Latin, it's falsus in uno, falsus in omnibus. If one thing is proved to be false, then everything is deemed to be false. That's the test in law. In law. Not rumour, supposition and finger pointing. In law. Falsus in uno, falsus in omnibus. It's a good old standing Latin maxim. Legal Latin maxim, if I can say it. So, let's go through this, shall we? And those that have accused me of sexism, racism, and anything ist or ism, then I'm looking forward to your apology. Because if you don't apologise after this, it says everything about you and nothing about me. Because all the while, I've been straight up and down and honest. And The Guardian will take this offline. Are you sitting comfortably, trolls? Lovely. Then I shall begin. A late-night shock jock drafted in by LBC owner Chrysalis is being investigated by watchdogs after a series of complaints from listeners. Don't say what the series was. Didn't say how many. And you believe the press? They've lied to you over everything over the last 2.5 years. And you're believing this from 20 years ago? Hatchet piece. The radio authority has asked for tapes after 3 protests about Adrian Allen's Through the Night show. The presenter has previously had complaints against him upheld by watchdogs after being accused of racism, homophobia and sexism. But the journalist doesn't name them. Just tells you. That's fact. Don't confuse me with facts, me mind's made up. Journalists do that. Lazy ones. This is a lazy journalist. 2 of the new complaints fall under the taste, decency and offence regulations, and 1 falls under the balance, bias and fairness rules. This journalist doesn't even know what they are. Because if she knew what the complaints were, she'd put them in this article to give it weight and gravitas and power, but doesn't. Remember, falsus in uno, falsus in omnibus. We'll continue with the bullshit. Allen has been reprimanded by watchdogs 3 times for making offensive jokes on air. Although complaints against him on 3 other occasions were not upheld. But she's not giving you any detail. There's no such thing. There was the LBC thing, where both LBC and I got a finger wagging. And there was the time in the North East, which is in this article, to be fair. So when she has definitive proof, she puts it in. When it's rumour, she leaves it out. But starts to muddy the waters by making it really grey. I shall continue. In June 2000, while working for Century 106 East Midlands, Alan claimed Romania were unable to field a football team because they were all over here claiming benefits. Do they not understand humour? It was a joke. Not a great one, but it's still funny. Because at the time, Romania was saying we can't field. They were going to play England and they couldn't field a side. So I just said, yeah, because they're all over here claiming benefits. Also, in June of that year, the radio watchdog upheld a complaint from a Century Radio North East listener that Alan had given out inaccurate information about the benefits given to asylum seekers, prompting a caller to say they should be kicked out of the country. Now, it's changed in 20 years. Nothing. But here's the rub. Our defence to the radio authority was Adrian corroborated the facts because they were printed in both the Sun and the Daily Mail. So 2 newspapers printed the very thing that came out of my mouth, and the radio authority said, it's inaccurate. So if I was inaccurate, they're saying that the Sun and the Daily Mail were inaccurate, but nobody took them to task, because that's where I got it. So what we did, whenever we got any complaints, like I say, the job of the presenter was to get complaints, not the music guys, the phone-in guys. Get complaints, because complaints, points means prizes. Complaints means audience. So we used to just invite them in, send them a really nice letter and say, why don't you come in? We'll show you around the radio station. You can meet Adrian. And we gave them a T-shirt and mugs and some freebies. And they always went away loving the radio station, loving my show and loving me. So I'm sure that guy, because I'm sure it was a guy, came in, shook hands, said hello, got some freebies, showed around the radio station, went into the live studio, always has a great effect on people, and went home happy. There is a reason why I'm telling you that, and it will all become clear, because I've got some great stories. In January 2001, a listener to Real Radio in South Wales complained about alleged, notice how she's using alleged, backside covering, that's what she's doing, alleged sexist, homophobic and racist remarks, of which the racist remarks, again about asylum seekers, were upheld. That's because I was allowing people to talk about asylum seekers. They didn't like it. And I will tell you this, the boss at the time, John Potts is his real name. So Potsy pulls me into the office and he goes, Adrian, will you stop about the asylum seekers? And I said, what for, John? What for, boss? Oh man, I'm getting heat. You need to stop talking about the asylum seekers. I'm getting heat. I said, all right, John, you can have me word. I won't talk about asylum seekers ever again on any of me phone-ins, on any radio station. So I went on air that night and talked about the economic migrants. He was apoplectic with rage the morning after. I mean, I gave him my word. I never talked about asylum seekers. I talked about economic migrants. So there is a very fine line, but it's a different side of the line for both of them. If you are seeking political asylum, then you seek political asylum in the first safe country you enter after leaving your country of oppression. That's why France should be keeping them all. You can't come from Albania. I noticed there was some driving problems in the centre of London the other night where the Albanians were celebrating all the Albanian asylum seekers. And I thought, hang on a second, how did Albanians get over here? You can go to Greece. Greece is the next country. It's a land connected with Greece, or you can just sail across the strait straight into Italy. So what the hell are they doing in England? They're economic migrants. They're not asylum seekers. Anyone that is fearing oppression should be allowed to come to this country. If there's real and present danger to people trying to come to this country, allow them in. But the economic migrants, you're going to stop in France. So the boss wasn't happy. And what happened with Real Radio was it was staffed. We were just based just outside of Cardiff, and we were staffed by mostly the Welsh. And on launch day, there was always, as it turned out, John Myers always presented the breakfast show and always launched with a song by Barbra Streisand called A Star Is Born. But what they did was they would bring the presenters up on stage and introduce every single presenter to the audience. And there was a massive crowd there. Free breakfast, everybody loved it. I think there was alcohol going at like 7 o'clock in the morning, but everybody loved it. So they brought the breakfast show up, yay! Then the mid-morning presenter, yay! Afternoons and drive, yay! The football phone-in and the evening show, yay! And then Adrian Allen, the presenter of the late night phone-in. Silence. Silence. You literally could see the tumbleweed going through the marquee. Silence. And all the presenters had walked up to the guy that was presenting them and said, hello, I'm going to be doing so-and-so and so-and-so. Look forward to you listening. And I walked up and said, my name's Adrian. You'll be screaming my name soon, and dropped the microphone and walked off. As it turned out, the radio station wanted to do some TV advertising, so I went into Cardiff to record Vox Pop's Voice of the People with the people in Cardiff. And what was the only name that anyone they spoke to in Cardiff could name from the presenter lineup of Real Radio? Correct. Adrian Allen. So the people of South Wales loved it. Once you gain the trust, once they understand what you're trying to do and who you are. I've had had no training in how to do this, but I've had many people committing suicide live on air. In South Wales, I had one woman that had called me up, had drunk a lot of alcohol, and called me up to read a poem to me. But I knew she was in trouble. So I just very gently probbed and probed and tried to find out what was going on, why she was wanting to read this particular poem to me, what was going on in her life. And unbeknown to the audience, I had her on air for about 45 minutes, just trying to hold her there, in the moment, in a safe space, so that we could get her some help. And the call ended when there was a knock at the door. And she said, oh, Adrian, sorry, there's a knock at the door. I said, go and answer the door. It's fine, go and answer the door. What she didn't realise was I got my phone up the stud muffin to call the police. And the end of the call was the police officer picking the phone up and saying, Adrian, we're here. We've got her. Thanks very much. I've had people call me at the end of a phone-in and say to me, I'd cracked some funny with some guy, and this next caller came on and he said, oh, it's all right for you to laugh. I said, what's up with you grumpy niggers? He said, I'm standing on a chair. I finished the rope and I'm going to jump. I spent most of that night live on air talking him down. I won't go into too much detail, but about 4 o'clock in the morning, the guy after me didn't do any of his show. I kept him on air because I knew if I kept him on air, I'd keep him alive. And all I will tell you about that particular call is he was still alive when I last spoke to him a few years ago. This is 25 years later. So you see, as well as getting the complaints, increasing the audience, you have to be sensitive sometimes to someone that's calling you as a cry for help. And help should always be given. There are some that wind you up and try it on and say, I'm going to kill myself. There have been times when I've told them, oh, well, if that's what you're going to do, off you go, I'll go to the next caller. And I've literally cut them off and gone to the next caller. Because they weren't. If you look at today's society and the challenges and difficulties that people are having, we should have late night phone-ins on the radio to help people in their moment of need when they've got no one else. So obviously there are organisations that are specialists in this, but I found in my time doing late night stuff, people would call me because they could trust me. So this article continues, and this is where I mentioned the Latin phrase, and this is why I mentioned the Latin phrase. LBC recently hired Alan to host the Friday, Saturday and Sunday Through the Night show after Mark Mendoza, who has presented the show for several years, was taken off air. That is correct. He was taken off air because they wanted me to do those shows, and they offered me a contract, and I said no. But his name's not Mark Mendoza. That's how pants she is as a journalist. It was really easy. Just check the radio listings. It's Mike Mendoza. Lovely guy. Mike Mendoza. Remember, if there's one provable thing wrong, it's all deemed false. Mendoza will return to LBC in the new year, presenting the late night show on Thursdays, Fridays and Saturdays. That's because I said no. I said to them, give me 6 months. Got stuff to deal with. And in 6 months, let's reconvene. And if the price is right, let's do it. And it was. They improved their offer. Since Chrysalis acquired the station in September, it has retained just a handful of the former presenters, hired a host of new names, such as the Sun's Jane Moore, who we had a bit of a spat with on telly once. Brilliant. She backed off. Nicky Campbell, who was in the same studio doing the same programme, oh, he loved it. In the green room afterwards, oh, you do a phone-in. You do it. Where do you do that? Evening, Nicky. And former Sky News presenter Frank Partridge and brought back some voices from the station's heyday, including Angela Rippon and Brian Hayes. Mark Flanagan, the managing director of LBC, said Mendoza was taken off air to test Alan, who the station hopes to use again in the future. The radio authority will study tapes and or scripts of the programmes in question to establish whether there is a cause for concern. There wasn't. And there's no such thing as scripts. What is this woman on? She's obviously been on the cooking sherry before she read this and wrote it. Well, scribbled it with crayon. The authority can issue a formal warning. This is where it gets really tasty. So she set it all up going, oh, he's a bad man. He's a bad man. Hatchet job, hatchet job, hatchet job. And here's what could happen. We're all going to hell in a handcart. The authority can issue a formal warning, demand a broadcast apology or correction, or impose a penalty, which may include a fine or the shortening, suspending or taking away of a station's licence. Nothing like that has ever happened to me or the stations that I work for. Nothing. We were barely admonished. That's why we went to the listeners and we gave them some nice stuff, station logoed stuff, just as a gesture of goodwill. But nothing's ever been done about me or my broadcasting or the stations that I broadcast on. Well, certainly not on my shows. And then she goes on to say, the biggest fine ever handed down was a DJ called John Holmes. I'm not going to go into that because it was disgusting. He got 75 grand fine. And Chris Evans got similar when he declared his support for Ken Livingstone in the London mayoral election. So you see, there's no substance to that at all. There's no evidence to that at all. It's her word. And would you believe a journalist in today's society? That's 20 years ago. 20 years ago. And the Guardian is still upset at me because they've got to pay people when they didn't want to. I had the best fun. So, to the trolls. that's what I was going to tell you. So, the racist was... They try to get racism pinned on me because of the asylum seekers. Homophobia, I have no idea what that is. It could literally be the fact that I used some phrases on air that wouldn't be acceptable now. And the sexism? I was working for a radio station that shall, at the moment, stay unnamed, and the news editor used to walk into the station every morning. And he used to walk into the open plan office and go, "Morning, Totty!" And all the girls in the office used to giggle and ooh. And then when he wasn't there, because I was part of the management, they would pull me to one side and go, "I don't like that. I don't like being called Totty." And I said to them, "Well, okay, I get it, but why don't you say something to him?" "Oh, no, I can't. He's the news editor." So I pulled him to one side and said, "Well, less of the Totty. They're not happy about it." So he used to come in, "Morning, Totty." So I went on LBC and I said, as programming material, "Is the word totty offensive?" Oh, it went nuclear. Southern women were going, "How very dare you? How very dare you? That's sexist. You can't call women toddy. I said, I wasn't calling women toddy. I was saying, is the word toddy offensive? Question mark. I wasn't making a definitive statement. I was asking you for your opinion. I had callers come on and say, get out of London. Get back up north. We don't want you here. Your type, get out of London. And it was brilliant. I mean, it was fabulous entertainment. But I was asking them whether toddy was offensive. And because I'd uttered that question, they wanted me squashed and gone. I mean, if they'd had a hearse and a gun, they would have taken me out of London and driven me back to the northeast. So I think that's where that comes from. No, I'm not sexist. But that was the conversation. They tried to nail me with it. It was a hatchet job. So there you go. I've been upfront. I've been honest. I've told you exactly what it is. That article is subject to a judge's order, and I am going to have a look at that. Because genuinely, a judge told them to take it off the internet, and they haven't. Naughty. So, if any of the trolls wish to apologise, I will accept it magnanimously. My name's Adrian Allen. Thank you for your likes, your subscriptions, but most of all, your indulgence. And don't forget to ding the bell. I'll see you in the next video.